Alright, we should be back. Let's see if this is any better. Test, test. Watching my own stream is probably not going to help my bandwidth. So we'll close that back down. Alright, chat people. Is this any better? You may not know for a while if you're saying it's every 2 minutes. Is there any noticeable difference in the quality of the video? Anybody? Anybody? Same? Still buffering? What can I do about that? That's annoying. I have to believe it's because of my home internet not being as fast as my office. Let's see if I do a speed test. That's probably not going to help the situation in the short term, but let's try it. So my downstream is pretty decent, but that doesn't help for me streaming out. Let's see how bad the upstream is. Yeah, that's pretty pathetic. That should be at least 5. I don't know why it's so low. Yeah, there's no way it's going to be a great experience on the streaming front. Alright. Well, I'm going to keep streaming anyway, and just basically be for posterity and for YouTube. So hopefully you might be able to catch this later on YouTube. But I apologize in the meantime if the experience is not great. There are certainly, I'm sure, other streamers you can go check out in the meantime. And I don't know what I can do to make it much better, other than maybe tether to my phone and see if my phone's internet is faster than Spectrum, because it probably is. But I'm not on a laptop, so tethering is harder. Alright. Now my question is, how much more do I need to add for this demo to sufficiently describe how Proxy Pattern works? Because I kind of have got it, right? Like, I don't need to do the same thing for tags and everything else, necessarily. Let's just do like one more thing with reviewing and call it done. So, public void, well, let's test drive it. So, let's do editor review document. Excuse me. Editor review document. Set state reviewed to current date time. So editor and they'll be in roles.editor. I probably need a document. And I am going to have to refactor the magic strings and everything I've got in these tests, because that's just going to bother me, and I don't want to be showing bad practices in this course. Set state reviewed, right. Okay, so then document dot mark reviewed, what do I call it? Review complete, complete review, that sounds good. And it was reviewed by the editor. And now we can say assert dot equal. The problem is if I just set it to some time, that's going to be rough. And I have to do a compare within some bound, but that's fine. Assert dot greater than? That's not a thing. Alright, assert dot true that the document dot review date reviewed date time dot UTC now minus document dot date reviewed is less than time span dot from milliseconds 500. Let's do that. That's not too awful, right? Hey, Silverlight 1042. Sorry, it's not much better. Like I said, I can't fix my internet from home, and I can't go to the office right now because of quarantine. So this is what we're living with. I can call Spectrum and tell them they need to fix my internet, so I'll work on that. Wonder if I can do that online. That would be good. Let's see. Yeah, I don't want to deal with that right now. Alright, so I want to do this. I want to be able to have this complete review method. So we're going to generate a method that does that. And then we'll go to definition on that. And here, it should simply set date reviewed equal datetime dot UTC now, like that, and this should just work. Alright, so this becomes its own class, and we jump to it, and we try and run this test, which should show up there. We'll run it. Alright, good luck, Simon Jerry. Thank you for following username that I'm not going to say. Set state review to current date. Alright. I feel like I should not deal with that user. Alright, so that worked. But I want the author, when they try and review it, to get some exception, right? So user add document. This should really be author. Author add document. And we'll change this accordingly. Sure. Whatever. Make sure I can still build. Yep. Alright, so now author should have a review. This should be another one for author. Now some of you are probably watching this thinking, why the heck is he making so many different test classes? Well, I follow a naming convention for my test classes where each class corresponds to a method. And it's probably overkill in this demo scenario where I could have just had one file full of proxy tests or something. But it's a good habit for like real software because it makes it really easy to find all the tests for a given method. Hi, I want to ask a question. Are structures like array with different data types? Structures. I'm not using structures. You're talking about a struct? Alright, so when an author reviews a document, it should not set the date reviewed. It should throw an unauthorized exception, right? So this should say throws unauthorized exception. Author review document throws unauthorized exception. That's pretty much all it should do. And does not set date reviewed. And really, date reviewed should be nullable, I think. So let's come over here and make sure that that's a nullable date time. Alright. Now, to make that work, we need to say you are an author, and you are in the role of author, and you're going to create this document, and then you're going to try and complete review with the author, and we're going to assert dot throws some exception when you do that. And that exception is going to be an unauthorized access exception again. And then we're going to assert dot null document dot date reviewed, because we also want that to be true. Right, so that should be it. So we should be able to run this test. And it fails, because we've not implemented it yet. Now, this document is an actual document, or is it? It's actually a proxy, right? Because we have used the proxy pattern inside of that factory to make that the case. So here, when we said create document, it returns a document, but it's actually a protected document. So that's going to be important for us, because now inside protected document we have the ability to override the method, which is not yet virtual. So we'll come over here, complete review. We generated this, remember, so it's just using the default values. It's making it internal, which is probably fine. In fact, this one could be internal as well for our needs. But it's important that it be virtual. Alright. So then once it's virtual, we can go back to our protected document, and our override here, we'll see it. We can override it. And it will call the base, but only if it does a check first. So this is a guard here. This is basically a guard clause. And it's checking if the user is not in the editor role. Then it's going to say you cannot review documents unless you are an editor. And do that. And it's going to complain and say it can't change that because that's can't be higher visibility than what I set it to, so they just have to match. So make that go back to internal. Everything's good. And let's run all of our proxy tests. And they all pass. So that means it's a good time to commit our code. We've messed with document, protected document, and some tests. We add all the things. Then we added reviewing functionality. And we'll push that up. Alright. So that is enough, I think, to kind of show how a protective proxy works here. If anything, I could probably clean this up and get rid of some of those things. Let's do a quick refactoring pass on our tests, though. So there's a couple things that I keep using here, like test name and test content. Those could easily be constants. So I would pull those up to a constant for that. So public const string test name, test document name equals test name, and then do the same thing for test document content, test content. Alright, And now these can be used anywhere that we're using those things. And likewise for this. Alright, we're going to not do that. We took care of that. We're not going to mess with tags. And we didn't submit it for review. We don't have that functionality, but that's alright. I think we got this covered. Let's take the things here as well. So let's just pull these up into a different class. Public class test constants, like that. We'll just move these into here. And then all these things can be prefixed with this. And now we're getting rid of magic strings out of all our tests. This can go to its own place. And then these get the same treatment. Alright. And apparently I've got this comment on every one of these files now. And this becomes that, content, Alright, that's a little better. Still more comments to get rid of. And that should be everything. Let's rerun all our tests just to be sure we didn't do anything dumb. And we're good. Alright, so now we have to review. We have a document type here. Document has a static factory method on it that is used to create instances of that document. Now, if you're using some kind of ORM tool like Entity Framework, it's still going to be able to create them using this. But otherwise your code will use this. Now there's a open question there that you should be asking, which is, okay, that's great. If I create them myself directly the first time, I can use this, and that will guarantee that I get back a protected document. How can I make it so that when I pull this thing out of persistence, and I'm using Entity Framework or something similar, that it's going to actually do the same thing, that it's going to give me back that protected document. And for now, this code does not deal with that. It's just left as an exercise for the reader for the moment. But it's something that I can show or write about later. There's a few different ways that we could do that. We could tell our DB set with Entity Framework to be a DB set of protected document and just use it everywhere like that. That would be maybe the simplest option. However, if you're trying to use subclassing for other things, or if you don't want your defaults for your tables to all be protected document instead of document, that could cause you more configuration headache. There's probably some other ways that we could leverage this to make it so that you would get that proxy document back. But like I say, they're out of scope for what I want to show in this demo. The protected document is following the signal responsibility principle. It's only responsible for verifying permissions on the document. And so as that being the case, the document itself is kept pretty simple. You'll notice that there's not a lot of if logic in here. It basically just does operations. Right? You call this method, it does these things. It does not do any behavior to check whether or not it should do those things. It just does them. and it leaves the protection to another class. Okay. Let's jump down to virtual proxy next. Let me pull up my slide deck for this. Alright, so virtual proxy, on my slide deck, I talk about how it's often used as a stand-in for expensive to create objects. Let's create a little README file on here. So add, hang on, did I do a commit? I did, right? Nope, not since I refactored. So git add dot git commit dash m refactoring tests push. Alright, now we're ready to jump to virtual proxy. Add a new item. Is markdown a thing in here? I don't think it is. I think I can just do a text file. README. And this will be virtual proxy. Stands in for expensive to create object. Gets real object itself. Can be used for UI placeholder. Can be used for lazy loading. Okay, so what are we going to do with this? Let's create an expensive object. Call it something silly like expensive. Now, why is it expensive to create? I don't know. It just is. But somehow I want to measure this. And again, I want to probably drive this with tests. So if I weren't doing it with tests, I would probably just log things like, whether or not I was creating this or creating a placeholder. How long did it take to create versus creating the placeholder? Things like that. In this case, the easiest way for me to get that information is going to be some kind of a string that's in this object itself. So let's create a property on this that is a history or status messages or something like that. So let's just create a public list of string. Call it history. History with a getter, and we'll just new it up. Alright. And we'll create a constructor, and we'll add a message to the history. Constructor. Like that. Okay. And then let's see. Do I want this to be the thing? So I have two options. I have a placeholder that wraps around this expensive to create object. Or I have this idea of doing lazy loading. And I feel like lazy loading is probably the scenario I want to show here instead. So instead of saying this is expensive to create, it's expensive to fully load, let's say. We're going to give it some other methods. So let's change that here, or some other properties rather. So we'll give it some other properties that are expensive to fully populate when it starts up. Alright, so let's say that this thing has a collection, not just of history, but it also has a public list of some expensive entity here called, I don't know, let's call it home entities. Nope, don't help me out. You'll see why I'm calling it home in a minute. Get, you need a private set, and this will also equal a new list. Right? And then we need this expensive entity. So we'll generate that type. There we go. Okay, so now in a test, I want to be able to know that when I try and iterate over the expensive entity, that I get, some message telling me that it was initially loaded that first time. And let's do 2 of these. So I'm going to home entities, and I'll say away entities. Because why not? I'm being a little bit too abstract here and not specifying what these are exactly. And maybe I'd be better off to have the demo be something more specific. I'll think about that for a minute. If anybody has a specific demo they want to ask about, feel free to let me know. Okay. So let me think about a test for this. Virtual proxy, we're going to add a new folder, we're going to call it tests. And we're going to say expensive to fully load is my test. Public class expensive to fully load. Constructor. Logs. Construction to history. Var object equals new expensive to fully load. Assert dot equal obj dot history dot first. Constructor called. And really I don't want it to just be the first, I want it to be the only one. So in fact we'll make that last instead. Alright, and you want to swap arguments. No, I don't want to swap arguments. No, I do want to swap arguments. Alright, good. Yeah, do it. Alright, I expect it to be this, and that's the thing. Alright. Thank you, helpers. Alright, so now we're going to pull this into its own class. I'm going to move that class into my test folder and give it the namespace to match. And then let's run it. Okay, so this first one should pass, and it does. Alright, now how do I represent that getting the data for these takes a long time? I could put it in the constructor, but that doesn't seem like a good idea. For one thing, you shouldn't do a lot of work in your constructor, and for another, it'll be difficult for me to not call that when I create my virtual proxy. There's 2 types of things that I could proxy. There's individual properties, and then there's collection properties. In this case, we're talking about collection properties, but it's actually easier for me to do it from a not collection. What do you think about this? Hello from Azerbaijan. Welcome. Apologies for the poor quality of the stream today. My home internet is not up to snuff. Or so I've been told. Okay. So the idea here is that when someone gets one of these expensive to fully load objects from somewhere, from Entity Framework or from some factory, if you just knew it up, then that's a whole different story. But we're talking about something that is being created for you. And so when we go to create this thing for us, these might be a problem, actually. Maybe I don't want to new those up directly. Let's get rid of those. I usually like to have those in my entities so that they never have a null ref on these things. But I think that might be a problem. And this might be one of those rare instances where an iList would be better than list here as well. Because really all I want is an IEnumerable, I think, for each of these. So let's see if we make that an IEnumerable, make that an IEnumerable, and somewhere we set these. And these are private, but they could probably be, let's say, protected. We'll use the inheritance approach. Okay. Now, let's find some data that actually loads this thing. So, let me think what that would look like. I need a factory that will create one of these, and we can just do it inside of this method. So let's do that. Public, expensive to fully load, create. And what does it need to create? It doesn't need anything, right? It just needs one of those. And it will create one of these. So var instance equals new expensive to fully load. And then normally what it would do is set home entities to be its default. So instance.home entities equals new list. New list of expensive entity, like that. And then populate it. And away entities equals another new list of expensive entity. Populate that. And we'd be done, right? Now if we want to make it so this is the only way we create this thing, we can switch this to be not public. But for now it's alright. And then eventually it needs to return that instance. Right? After completing, could you please publish it to your repo? Yep, it's already there. So if you look under GitHub, Ardalis, Design Patterns in C#, it's out there. I've been committing as I go. Let me throw the URL out here. So here you go. Design Patterns in C# is where it's at. Currently it's in this branch, Ardalis/Proxy. So if you jump to that branch, you'll see all the latest code. Use Octotree plugin, you can navigate around like this. There's a bunch of code here in the protective proxy so far. We're about to have virtual proxy in there as well, as soon as I do another push. But this is where the code will be. Oh yeah, and I was going to paste that into the chat. Obviously it'll be on master once I do a pull request. But for now you'll find it in its own branch. Okay. Any other questions? Alright. So probably it would be wise for me to go and do some Googling on this and find an existing implementation of the proxy pattern for lazy loading for this type of scenario. But let me keep just trying to brute force it here without that. What I eventually would like to have is for this collection here and this collection here to not actually be lists that are fully populated, but rather for them to be proxy of those collections, that as soon as something tries to iterate them, they will go and get their data. Alright? So for that to work, I need to know how they get their data here somehow. If this were Entity Framework, how they get their data would be a SQL statement and a connection string. And so it would literally go and call that SQL statement at that time. And someone keeps trying to call me. Let me check, see if this is important. I'm guessing not, but... Nope, that is not useful. Okay. Alright. So I need a proxy of a collection that knows when they try to enumerate over it, it'll go and get the actual data. So this populate method becomes important. So let me create an expensive data source that knows how to get these things. Let's do that. So we'll say public static expensive data source. Needs to be a class. And this expensive data source should be able to write to the history of the entity, I think. So maybe there's going to be some double dispatch going on here, just so I'd like to be able to see in the history when it actually got loaded. So we'll say there's a public list of expensive entity, get entities from just to get entities, fine. And then let's pass in the thing, expenses fully load, object to, so it's the owner. It's the owner of these things. Alright, now it doesn't really need to do anything exciting. We can give it a thread sleep or something here if we wanted to. But the important thing it's going to do is it's going to add to the history of the item, and it's going to return back a list of entities. So, let's do... does expensive entity have anything on it? I didn't give it anything. So public int ID get set. We'll give it that at least. And then we'll go back to here. And we'll say for I equals 1 to 10. Can I just set it? Not from here. So I just want to return that a list. So I need a new list. So var list equals new list of expensive entity, like that. List.add, new expensive entity, ID equals I. Return the list. Okay. And in here we're also going to say owner.history.add got expensive entities from the source. Alright. Cannot declare, yeah, you should be static. Okay, so now I have an expensive data source that's going to tell me when it does stuff. And if we wanted to, we could maybe add in a thread sleep here, but all that's going to do is slow things down. So now this thing, when it says populate, what it really needs to do is say instance.homeentities.add And this thing is a new list. In fact, this thing will take in the collection, right there. So ads dot get entities, like that. Alright, I'll probably want to change that later. But for now, I think that might work. Alright, so there's our populate home and away. And we can write some tests for this now. So, expensively a constructor. Instead of constructor, let's do create. Expensive to fully load. Create. Equals expensive to fully load dot create. You're not static? You should really be static. But if you're static, you don't have a this. That's going to be a challenge. You have an instance, though. So that's fine. Alright. Now, back to our test. Call create. Should have that. Does that still work? Yeah. No. Does not work, because now it has get expensive entities from source. Alright. So that's a to-do, to fix. And so what it needs is a proxy. It needs that virtual proxy. So there's our fully load. There's how it works now. This we want to defer until later. And so we want this to be not a new list, but a new proxy list. Alright, so we'll keep this expensive data source off in another type. And let's create a proxy list. So public class. And there's a few ways you can do this. You could use lazy of t if you wanted to. I think we'll just try and do the simplest thing we can. So we'll call this a lazy list. Inherits from list of t. Like that. And we're going to give it a new constructor, I think. And that new constructor is going to have a func of t in it. Load method, I guess. And this will call base with this. Like that. Alright, and then this should be an enumerable of t. Okay. So now this supports calling that. Alright, so now if this just becomes this lazy list, and then this becomes a lambda, then our test should pass again. And this is the part I think I want to show in the actual demo in the course, is how making this change changes our behavior. So now when we go to create this thing, and we run it, we should see, hopefully, oh, is it still running it immediately? Oh, because I put it on the constructor, that's why. Yeah, I only wanted to do that not on the constructor, but when we get to iterate it. So this lazy list, right, it needs to store that load method. Private func of IEnumerable of t load method. And so get rid of that. It's not quite what I wanted. And instead, well, I guess I can just use the built-in assigned to a private field like that. I get my read-only. And then I can do an override of enumerable, which I can't do. Why can't I do that? What if you were an iList? Then what could I do? Might have to implement all these members. But get enumerator is the one I want. Let's go back to iList. And let's go ahead and implement it. Let's see what we get here. I certainly can implement all these things. So for now, we cannot implement exception on most of them and be fine. The other thing I can do is have this thing just be a wrapper. Hey, live coding. Yeah, sorry, my bandwidth is crap. Maybe I'll just make a run to the office despite quarantine and do my streaming from there. Alright. Now the only one of these things I really want is this get enumerator. And when get enumerator is called, that's when I want to create the thing. I was hoping I could just inherit from the underlying collection, but I might have to actually wrap it instead, and in which case I would have to pass in the underlying list, which I don't like nearly as well. So let me think about that. I'm doing some research on my other screen. let me undo the list stuff. I think if I make these virtual, then if I return back a proxy of this itself, is that what I want? No. I'm trying to keep too much logic about this from being in the class itself. But I think these have to be virtual. That's not, there's no way to get around that. So if we create a public class virtual expensive to fully load inherits from that, then we can override those home and away entities. Let's do away entities like that. And now it's going to do the getters and setters will not be autoprops, right? They will be defined here. But now I can say something like, you know, do I have something created if I haven't used base entities? So we can do something like this. We can say get like this, and say if base.away entities equals null, then go fetch them. Base.away entities equals whatever. What's my data source? Expensive data source dot get entities. And this should just be a new list of expensive entities with that.